I was watching 28 Weeks Later, and I had to laugh because I remembered amusingly your fear of people with small eyes.
Yeah, Robert Carlyle, man. He's like, there's something not right about Robert Carlyle. He's got tiny beady eyes, like they were made of like chocolate buttons or something. He's basically a human gingerbread man. Like,
there are so many cold opens in this last conversation that we're going to have to save them for next week as well.
good evening once again, Funketeers. I'm your host, Dan, and for this episode, we're going to the movies. Get your coat, get your scarf, and grab a bucket of sweet, sweet popcorn as I meet up with my guests, Martyn, Tom, Alex, and Dave, to talk all about movie soundtracks. Actually, don't get your coats and scarves as it is August. Anyway, what's everyone else been up to?
This has been a really exciting 2 weeks in music. Number one, my copy of the new Biffy Clyro album arrived, and it's not up there with the holy trinity of their first three albums, but it is the best album they've released in 10 years by far. And my girlfriend's 17-month-old son fucking loved it. So it's brilliant, and like compared to anything they've done since Sony Revolutions. So I thoroughly recommend you all check it out. Also, the special edition comes in a really cool case, and I really appreciated the fact it had the sheet music for all the string arrangements in it, which was really cool. So there was that, and then Smashing Pumpkins released 5 different countdown timers on their website, the first of which ends at midnight on Thursday night, and I am well hyped for that, so I used that as an opportunity to dig through their back catalogue. I do own something like 500 different items of music released by Smashing Pumpkins, though, so they have been my favourite band since I bought their first album in 1991, and I think I own every compilation, numerous different versions of each album every time they release one with bonus tracks. So like, I'm a huge fan, even though I do appreciate they haven't released anything especially good since the year 2000. I'm still going to buy whatever they release.
Too deep.
And I'm too deep now. I can't have anything missing from the collection. I have shelves of the stuff. And then also this week, Deftones, was it yesterday, dropped a new single, and the new album's coming on the 25th of September. So a classic band that both Martyn and I have banged on about in 2 of the last 3 episodes have a new album coming out. And it's, well, I don't know, Martyn, what did you think of the new single?
It's the new single Ohms.
Ohms, yeah.
Yeah. Very good. I thought it was quite kind of like it's quite accessible. Yeah. Compared to their usual stuff, and it's just a comforting thing, isn't it? Just hearing them and hearing Chino's voice and everything. I didn't like the use of the blues scale in the intro rundown. That initially turned me off. Then it went to that sort of nice. Ever since Saturday Night Wrists, they've done that beautiful sort of mellow wall of guitar noise with Chino's vocal, and that's just. That cranked to full volume is my happy place.
I listened to it, and in all honesty, I didn't really like it because I knew we'd be talking about it today. But I don't know, I like because you like it from Saturday, like Deftones from Saturday Night Wrist. But for me, that's like when I stopped listening. Their change in sound was very subtle, but I just didn't get into it. I tried Diamond Eyes, I thought I was okay, but
are you a White Pony man, Alex?
Yeah, like an Around the Fur as well. I love that one.
Around the Fur, yeah.
And just self-titled. Those sort of 3 albums for me.
Yeah, their self-titled album is my favourite of their albums by a head and shoulder. See, the thing is, I have a real tough call then because I love White Pony. Changing the House of Flies was one of like my favourite songs when it came out. And I bought it at the time, and so I absolutely loved it. But then Saturday Night Wrist, Hole in the Earth, and Beware have big choruses, big shoegaze choruses, and like Deftones on Saturday Night Wrist sound like all the post-rock bands I loved with an incredible vocalist on top. And so for me, I loved Saturday Night Wrist. I really got it.
I guess that makes sense why you were into that stuff then.
Yeah,
I thought you liked their first album.
Oh, I bought it. I bought their first album in 1995, and I absolutely loved it. I never bought Around the Fur though. This is what's odd. I bought Adrenaline and when it came out, and I bought White Pony when it came out. But I completely skipped Around the Fur, and I don't know it that well. I did decide with their new album coming up that I'd fill in all the gaps in their discography, because if you go on eBay, the CDs are like £1, including postage. So I was like, oh, great, let's fill in all the gaps, and then I'm going to have a Deftones day on maybe September the 24th and listen to all 8 of their albums and the B-sides compilation in order.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good day.
I could listen to Minerva on repeat over and over again.
September the 24th, is that an anniversary of an uninteresting event, Tom?
Ha ha. Their album comes out on the 25th, so I figured a day of preparation. And the thing is, I might include, if I include Chino's side projects like Team Sleep and Palms and stuff.
I hate Team Sleep.
See, I did quite like the first Team Sleep album, but I did really like Palms. And the reason, and I think it's just because the backing, it's Palms is ISIS with Chino Marino fronting it, doing something new. It's great. Yeah.
Well, we should probably get off Deftones because I feel like it's going to come up every 10 minutes for the next every half hour.
They've not done a film soundtrack, have they? So I think we'll be all right.
Martyn, what have you been up to?
My name's Martyn, and this is my United States of whatever. I've been working mainly. I always do. That's all I do. I work, and because of my job, that it's kind of unsociable working hours, so I don't get a chance to listen to a lot. I've been making music. I'm working on this Goldfrapp type thing, which was played in the last podcast, one of my drafts of it, and I'm still working on that, which I quite like. It's all in Logic. It's all synth. There's no guitars or anything on it at the moment. So yeah, working on that and just kind of like mucking about with music. So yeah, that's just me.
Dave, what have you been up to?
So much like Martyn, I've been very busy with work this week, so I haven't actually been up to much, embarrassingly, but I've got some things on the back burner that I want to actually sit down and get a couple of mixes together. I went to IKEA and bought some bookcases and have been organising my 7-inch records. I've got, as I probably mentioned in previous podcasts, quite a lot of 7-inch records. 45 is like my favourite medium for records. So I'm trying to make up a bag of like one particular genre and another one, and the rest I'm going to just file up. But yeah, aside from that, not a whole heap, to be dreadfully honest.
Being around you guys, I always feel so self-conscious because you guys are getting like these giant vinyl collections together, and I'm like proud of my CD collection still. I think you guys are past that now.
Oh no, you need to have both, man. I've just been given another CD case by a chap down the road, and I've filled that already. So I'm at like 2,000 CDs. So you know,
hell.
I've got digital with my collection. Like I've got just under 30,000 songs, but if I go physical, if I start collecting vinyl or CDs, I just won't have the room for it. So I made the decision about five years ago to go just digital one.
I've done it. I've had thousands and thousands of records and sold them all and gone digital, and then rebought them all and gone back, then sold them all and gone digital again, and I'm on my third wave of buying it all back. So
I've done
Discogs says the collection is currently worth £10,000 apparently on Discogs when I've collected it all.
I think you actually log your full collection on Discogs, so I don't. When I
go to the record shop, I don't buy things twice. That's the only reason, because I cannot remember what I do and don't have.
I can understand that. When I went to university in 2005, so I was all digital between 2005 and like 2008, and then I realised that hard drives break, and then you lose everything. But if you drop a CD down the toilet, you only need to replace one. So physical is definitely better.
Do you know what? I totally agree, because it happened to me last year. You know, my whole collection is pretty much digital. I'm building a really nice vinyl collection, but yeah, I had a situation where I lost all of my digital music. I've got it all back now, which is good, but I don't think I could afford to spend money on CDs now. It would all go on effects pedals and guitars, but I'm going to continue to buy vinyl.
Cool. Al, what have you been up to? What have you been listening to?
Well, at work, where I do most of my listening, I've actually been going through Game of Thrones again. So I'm currently on like season 7, and God, man, that series gets really bad from season 6.
Yeah. We're not a TV-based podcast, but I mean, Game of Thrones was great up until season 5, and then it kind of just dropped off a cliff.
Yeah, I've been listening to one band called One Step Closer. Yeah, well, it's an EP called From Me to You. I think it's their like first EP they've made when they've actually put money into recording. They're some American band, but man, it's really good. It kind of sounds like a cross between At the Drive-In, Refused, and another hardcore band I like called More Than Life. And oh man, I'm loving it. It's one of those EPs where I'm not sure everyone else would think it's as good as I do, but it just happens to hit the exact thing I want. So it's one of those albums or EPs.
On that subject, do you know a hardcore band called Cold World?
I don't actually know. Are they good?
Yeah, I was listening to it again this week. I was listening to the album. It's called Dedicated to Babies That Came Feet First.
Awesome. That's an awesome
That's a
name.
great album name.
Awesome.
They use some really odd, like, funk samples and things.
Oh, yeah, I added to the list then because I'm looking after for more hardcore all the time. A lot of the hardcore I listen to at the moment is like, it's not really old stuff. It's kind of like just new bands, because I found a YouTube channel I like where they're just putting up videos consistently of just hardcore bands near them.
Nice.
And that's where I found this band and another band. Like, have you guys heard of Knocked Loose? They're awesome.
Yeah. I really like Knocked Loose.
Yeah, man. Like I heard of them on the same channel, so I'm just pretty much following this channel religiously, and every now and again a band.
There's a band from Southampton that I really like called Grove Street Families. Named after the GTA thing.
That's an awesome name.
But they're a really cool hardcore band, local guys.
Oh man, you're gonna have to give me a list at some point, because I'm always trying to listen to more. What else have I listened to? Yeah, so I've also listened to Warbringer's new album, sort of a new wave thrash band, and I love this band. Like, they're one of those bands I'd love to go see live. But the new album's called Weapons of Tomorrow, and it's just awesome. If you guys like thrash music, this is one that's really good. They've taken because before they were very, it sounded like it was like recorded someone's like garage or something, which I really liked. They progressively got better production quality as they went along, and I'm kind of on the fence whether I like it or not, because the worse a band sounds, it seems, the more I like them. But it's a really good album, and I recommend anyone give it a go if you guys like thrash, because who doesn't like thrash, right guys?
I have a theory with thrash bands. I think that the heavier a thrash band are, the more illegible their band logo is. So you look at some of the like posters for festivals and things, and you think, right, all the top headliners have usually got like fairly standard logos. You can clearly see what the band is, but then the lower down you go, like the dirtier and heavier and more like less accessible, you get bands. And I'm just reading it going, well, that doesn't appear to be words.
Yeah. That's more true in the sort of doom metal and the black metal scene.
Metal.
Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Dan. The logos, they're all in the same sort of typeface that looks like tree branches.
It's become a parody of itself. Like you see, like they had like Spinal Tap putting umlauts above like the O's, like Motorhead, and that kind of thing has become a real thing with these bands.
I saw a picture on a forum once of someone eating a slice of cheese pizza, and the cheese had kind of gone stringy and fallen in his lap, and he took a picture of it. He was wearing black jeans, and he said, "This is my new band logo." It looked exactly like one of those fonts.
Have you guys seen I think there was from some festival. I'm looking at the picture now on Google because I had to remember what the band was called. I think it's like Bay Arena Death Fest 2 or something. And it was just all these death metal bands of completely illegible writing. Yeah. There's one band who thought, just fuck it. And they're called Party Cannon.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And it's just balloon multicolored writing. It's the clearest thing. Like, you look at the poster, you instantly look at them.
But
it's an absolutely amazing idea. And if you listen to them, they're heavy as fucking balls.
They are really heavy.
I'd go and see Party Cannon. I'd go and see Party Cannon at that festival. Like, I would be there, totally. So I've been listening to a lot of the same band. I've discovered a band. I've got really into the Cars I listened to their self-titled debut from 1978 because I knew My Best Friend's Girl, and I'd heard Drive, which I just thought was just a standard kind of new wave synth pop ballad thing. I went back and heard songs like Just What I Needed, Bye Bye Love, You're All I've Got Tonight. Those songs are amazing, and I've been obsessed with the Cars. It's very what I'm into. It's kind of punky in a way, but there's a lot of synth used in it, and very effectively. I think one of my best moments from the first album is when the synth player actually puts down the synth and plays the saxophone to close the album. He was actually an accomplished saxophonist, and it's just a fantastic album from start to finish. I've listened to it about 3 or 4 times in the last week. It's great. It's one of my favourite albums of all time. And I've only just discovered it. It's fantastic. I love them. I'm gradually going through their back catalogue. I listened to Candia, their second album, which is pretty good. I know they kind of didn't hit the same heights as the first album as they went along, but they're definitely a band, if you've never got into them, worth checking out.
How has it taken you this long?
I know.
That's the band I grew up with. My dad used to play me cassettes of the Cars on the way to, on road trips. They're like a seminal, they're like one of the most important bands of the late 70s. There's some great covers of Cars tracks. I know Smashing Pumpkins are big fans of the Cars. I know they've done some work with Rick Ocasek. But yeah, if you're into that sort of era, like a relatively unknown band from the late 70s doing some interesting post-punk new wave stuff, are a band called Fischer Z. Fischerz. Some of the cleverest political lyrics around that time, but definitely a real synth pop aesthetic going on. They're definitely worth checking out from that era. If you're into that thing at the moment, Dan.
I think a good topic for a future podcast would be classic bands that have always been around that you haven't got into until later in life. I know XTC are a big one for me. You know, I didn't get into XTC until 2 years ago, and I was like, why was I not listening to this band for all of my life?
It's so good though, because like you feel like so happy when you find them, because you've just got so much music listening. Like recently, I completely missed the boat on Deep Purple. Just completely missed the boat, and I'm just listening to it constantly in my car now because it's just awesome. I was like, how do I not hear this?
I think if you're a very strong music fan like we all are, and we've spent our youth finding new bands, and we still do to some degree, I think that it's easy to miss out on stuff that's always been around. And I think that it kind of things just pass you by because you think, oh, that band exists, I'll get round to it another day. It's almost like with us as music fans, it's almost like homework that we keep putting off until the deadline.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's such a vast array of stuff to keep up with, even if you're just going on new releases. So, to be diving back into the past as well, it's just unmanageable. That's kind of the fun of it. It's just chaotic, and you stumble across things, and that's why I like going to record shops. You just flick through stuff, and you're like, oh, I don't know what that is. Throw it on, see what it's like. I would have never known that band existed if I hadn't been in that record shop on that day, just flicking through the records.
Dave, what you said, I think the word is unmanageable. I think personally there is. Bit like photography, it's almost like there's too much music. There's too much to actually absorb and take in. I mean, like we were talking about digital format earlier. You know, I'll put on my iPod on shuffle, and there's probably about half of what I've got on there I've probably never listened to before. Like half of the Frank Zappa back catalogue, you know, I've not listened to it all.
Yeah, there's a lot of Frank Zappa.
Do you want to know the thing that made me really depressed for humanity the other day? I went to Sainsbury's, selling Pearl Jam's 10 on vinyl in Sainsbury's.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing, actually.
And they had Jeff Buckley's Grace. On the one hand, it does mean that hopefully, and in Sainsbury's, it's put near all of like the clothes, so like the women's clothes. So I mean, it might expose like young women to like decent music rather than the stuff that's in the charts.
Imagine coming across Grace for the first time. Imagine somebody just going to buy some avocados. And some,
that young man looks nice in his silk shirt.
Yeah. So I'm going to check that guy out, take it home, and you're straight away Dream Brother, and you're like, whoa, this is probably one of the greatest things.
Mojo appeared out of nowhere, bang.
Yeah.
He got ran over by a riverboat or something, didn't he?
He drowned. I think he was only 32, 33. No, was he 27?
Yeah, it's 27 Club.
Is Jeff? I'm looking that up. I'm not sure Jeff Buckley qualifies. Jeff Buckley.
He was an underrated guitar player as well. I don't think people appreciate his guitar playing as much as they should.
Remember, he was just a whine because he got all of the hippie crowd that his dad used to attract, because his dad was an accomplished musician as well.
Tim Buckley, wasn't it?
If you haven't listened to Tim Buckley do Song for the Siren, he's the original version of it, you need to listen to it.
It's beautiful.
It is. You can hear where Jeff Buckley got it from when you hear his dad sing.
Totally, man.
Tim Buckley's voice is what Tim Buckley was doing with his vocals is like the British version of Neil Young.
I do prefer the 4AD version of Song to the Siren, but then there's a Lost Highway reference.
That film is going to come up later. I can guarantee it.
It haunts me. It really haunts me, that film. It's very disturbing.
Yeah. Two things before we get on to talking about movie soundtracks. But firstly, Jeff Buckley was not a member of the 27 Club. We have confirmation that he was 30 years old when he died. So he's not
me fucking wrong.
Yeah, he's not a member of the 27 Club. The other thing I wanted to just say that I've been doing musically, I must mention that I recently did a cameo in a music video that was released yesterday. So
I have not seen this, man.
So my friend Dan, he goes by the name Calligraphy, is his rap name. He's made a great song using James Brown samples called Defunct, and he sent me a message asking if I wanted to cameo in it. There's lots of people that cameo in it, and I'm one of them. So you can see me dancing in a gold jacket, nonetheless, in that video. So check it out. It's a good song. Tonight we are, as we've mentioned, talking about movie soundtracks. We want to talk about the good ones, but I think firstly we do want to give some soundtracks a kicking, because there are some terrible soundtracks out there as well. And sometimes it is fun to just rip into to somebody else's hard-crafted work. I think what I wanted to do is I want to ask Tom if he has a nomination for what he thinks is the worst movie soundtrack of all time.
Oh, so this is a really, really difficult one for worst. So I'm as it may have come across in episode 1, if you want to listen back to that. I have a background in classical music, and I've actually done some work doing film soundtracks. So the first thing I'll say is I did a soundtrack for a short film, and it nearly killed me. So I do have an appreciation for soundtrack writing. However, so when I looked at film soundtracks, I'd say there are 4 main ways to look at film soundtracks. Okay. You've got your classical music film soundtracks, so your John Williams, your Hans Zimmers, your Philip Glass, your Michael Nymans. You've got that sort of group. Then you've got your rock soundtracks, which is where you've got stuff that I'm going to talk about later, where rock bands do a whole soundtrack to a film. Actually a good example of that, because it isn't going to be one of my favourites, but Toto, the band, did a soundtrack for David Lynch's Dune, which is actually a really great soundtrack for a film I love.
Great band, very underrated.
I like that we're talking about Lynch a lot already. I like this.
He's going to be up there a lot, isn't he? But so you've got your classical soundtracks, your rock soundtracks, then you've got your mixtape soundtracks, which is where I'd put every Tarantino film, for example, where they just take a list of, they put together loads of songs that already exist. Now, when we're talking about soundtracks, from a composition point of view, I think that's quite lazy. But from an artistic point of view, when done well, like somebody like Wes Anderson does it, I think it does work quite well. And then you've got your films that are basically just an album put onto film. So I've sort of grouped into those 4 categories, and then I'm sort of going to throw one in each category that I hate. So
okay.
In the and then you guys can help me pick which one of those is worst, because I'm not really sure, because it's just like, which way do you want to die, isn't it? In terms of the music movie, it's really a toss-up between High School Musical and Cool as Ice, the Vanilla Ice movie, as to which one of those is the worst. Then in the mixtape category, we have a film that I actually really enjoyed as a kid, but A Knight's Tale, because, I fucking hate Queen at the best of times, but Robbie Williams covering Queen is just a step too far. Then you've got the rock soundtracks. This one, I actually struggled to find a rock soundtrack I don't like, but the one I'd probably least like is a soundtrack where I haven't seen the film, but I did buy the soundtrack, which is the band Shudder to Think did a soundtrack for a film called First Love, Last Rites, where they got loads of guest vocalists in. I wasn't a fan of that soundtrack. And then in the classical soundtrack, so Philip Glass is a composer I love. I have a huge amount of respect for. He makes opera listenable, right? He's a great composer, but his soundtrack to Martin Scorsese's Kundun really annoyed me throughout the whole film because there is no need to have dodgy 80s synths soundtracking a film about the Dalai Lama. It's just wrong.
There's no such thing as dodgy 80s synths. There's just 80s synths, and they're awesome.
I concur, Alex.
The correct opinion.
Watch Kundun and tell me others. Also, I'd like to add, I really hate John Williams. And I hate everything he's done.
Oh, shots fired. I want his mum dead. I want his dad dead.
No.
I want his dog dead.
So,
You can ban him, Alex, if you want. You're allowed to ban him.
No, it's not that extreme. But the problem I have with John Williams is he writes a good hook, right? But
Did he do Hook?
I don't know if he did hook. I hope so. It'd be a great pun right there. But
With Peter Hook from Joy Division.
Yeah.
I watched Control yesterday. It was again
Conducted by Abu Hamza.
But he writes interesting little bits of music that those little bits of music completely overpower the ability for a scene to have any dialogue in it, and then I have to listen to the fucking thing on Classic FM all day when all I want them to do is put on some decent shit, and I have to listen to John Williams all day because people know what film it's from, and it's not good classical music. If you want good classical music, listen to some Prokofiev or some Stravinsky or some Rachmaninoff. Let's stop elevating John Williams to that level because he's not there, right? He writes a nice little hook and then ruins any dialogue in the film, and then I have to listen to it when I could be listening to Stravinsky's Rite of Spring because some idiot on Classic FM thinks it's better.
Tom, you're mixing the message. So do you like him or not? I need to be clear.
No, I don't. I like a 30-second clip of a nice little bit of melody, and then everything after that is bad musical development. It's like you hear what Eric Satie wrote about Wagner, right? Eric Satie hated Wagner because he was
I didn't hear that.
Wagner, right? Wagner's The Ring Cycle is overblown tripe because it's overdeveloped to the point of being unlistenable, right? John Williams' scores are a nice little piece of music that is then overdeveloped out to make it into a piece you can put on a soundtrack, and it's bollocks, right? He's made a lot of money. He can take my criticism, I'm sure. Oh, actually, I hate Danny Elfman because it's just the same piece of music over and over again in a slightly different key. Basically, it's Mozart. And then I also really dislike Hans Zimmer as well because I just want to listen to the dialogue in my films rather than some overblown orchestral stuff. So
the thing about Hans Zimmer, right, is that whole it started that trend of the Brahm, that you get in all the trailers, especially on the Marvel universe.
Oh, like the Inception. The Inception
thing. I actually once, for a laugh, just made one. It's layer trumpets over and over and over again through the sonic spectrum of like the high tenor right down to the bass. But yeah, I think it worked really well in Inception, but overused. But I really, really like Zimmer. I think I think he's brilliant personally. But then, to be fair, Tom, to you, man, I'm not as well knowledgeable about classical music. So to me, listening to Hans Zimmer is like the equivalent of someone who loves post-rock listening to Blink-182.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like listening to Hans Zimmer as high art and comparing it to high art classical music. It's like going to watch a bad covers band, right? He does have some really good ideas in there. Don't get me wrong, but in general, I find a lot of and I will get onto them later. There are some classical film composers who are doing some really interesting stuff and some really good stuff, but I find people like Hans Zimmer, it is very much like going to watch. What's a good example of this?
Oasis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like going to
No way, sis.
yeah, no Oasis or the Russells or something like that, or or Bjorn again.
Bootleg Beatles.
It's like watching somebody taking classical music ideas that are done so well, rehashing them in a film and getting loads of plaudits. When you listen to like a lot of the brass work that Zimmer's using, you go back to, is it Sibelius Symphony No. 5? Is it either the first or the third movement? Has one of the most beautiful French horn sections I've ever heard in classical music, and it is ripped off in films by people like Zimmer and Williams all the time. I think my biggest problem with Zimmer is it's held up to be high art when I think there is high art that is of greater value that is overlooked because it's not on film soundtracks. I think that's my biggest problem with those classical composers. So I don't think they should be my worst nomination. I think I've had a nice little rant though.
Rantosaurus Rex of it.
A Knight's Tale, Cool as Ice. Shudder to Think, and then Philip Glass Cundon. I think of those four, the one I'm probably going to go for is worst soundtrack. Actually, sod it. No, let's do it because I hate it so much. We'll go High School Musical as the worst film soundtrack. Let's do that.
Mine, what would you say is the worst movie soundtrack?
Well, it's a difficult one for me because I don't listen to bad soundtracks, and that's why I had to actually go on the internet, type into Google worst soundtracks ever made, and then it just suddenly came to me and it clicked. Now this is going to be contentious, I think. Well, I don't know about you guys, but anyone listening to this, it might be. I'm going to go for I'm going to set this up by referring back to when we spoke about Journey's Don't Stop Believing last podcast. How I hated how ubiquitous it is and how like everyone bangs on about like it's the best song ever, it's the pub song or whatever. I still haven't.
But when you say everyone, you mean me.
No. This isn't.
He's been seething about this for weeks now.
Yeah,
he's still wrong now, like he was last week. It's fine. I'm okay with it.
Man, but anyway, I'm going to go for the Rocky Horror Picture Show because I just cannot.
Oh, my girlfriend would kill you for saying this.
I cannot stand.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Martyn.
Bangs on about the fucking Rocky Horror Picture Show. I do not. Do you know what? This is the thing. I've never seen the film, and I'm sure the film is probably quite good. I'd probably enjoy it if I watched it. I don't know, but anyway, it's just the time warp. It's just it is. It's another Don't Stop Believing. It's one of those things where
it comes on and it just sucks all the energy out of the room.
Yeah, it totally sucks the energy. Well, yeah, it kind of does, but all of the people that don't really appreciate music love it.
Oh, time warp! Woo!
Yeah, it's like, just go away with your fucking... Actually, get in a time machine, go back before music was invented, and don't invent music just so that song could never be invented. I would happily do without Mogwai. I'd happily do without Nine Inch Nails. I'd happily do without Deftones, just so that song didn't exist.
That would erase the existence of this podcast as well.
Well, truly, but we'd be talking about something else.
You're all going to spend
books.
We'd be talking about books.
We'd be discussing Aldous Huxley versus fucking 1984. We'd be like doing that thing. We'd be like, yeah, what's the best book? And slagging that off, and then I'd be saying, go back before written word was invented, so that books were never invented. Never read that book.
Rudyard Kipling was a brute.
J.R.R. Tolkien is a sued. No, I'm sure there's a lot of merit to that film. I
love it. I love it. I
don't want to. I really don't want to be one of those guys that's like, slating on something that everyone likes, and because something is popular doesn't make it good, but it also doesn't make it not good.
Do you think you don't like it because you haven't seen it, because you haven't got the context in the film and the characters? You might like it less just because it's just something that comes on. You've just learned to loathe. You know what I mean? Like, if you watched it, you might enjoy it more.
It's that soundtrack. It's the music to it.
I've watched it and I didn't enjoy it more.
The thing is, I'm not into that whole like musical kind of flamboyant kind of like everyone's on stage and everyone's dressed up thing.
I love that. I love that. That's me. That's my world.
That's you, man. Absolutely.
I love Rocky Horror. I hadn't seen it until very late in the game. Actually, probably it's about 8 or 9 years ago now. But I have seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was aware of the Time Warp before and a few of the songs, but when you watch it, it does provide bigger context for it, and it makes it more enjoyable. But I mean, I like that kind of music anyway. It's big, it's campy, it's great. It's a very cult film.
I think with me, I think it's a personal thing in that whenever I hear that song, I want to vomit, but like I can understand why people like it. I can understand it. It's a unifying thing. There's a cult around it, and when people hear that song and they know it, and they know they know the film, they know the musical, and people go out and watch the musicals, don't they? You know, in the West End theatre that you have these days and all that. It's like I kind of get it. I understand that, and you know, when I start being really hipster about my good choice later on, people are going, "Oh, why don't you fuck off?" But like, me personally, I just cannot. I can't deal with it, man.
Any film that allows me to go to a party wearing a pair of gold hot pants and nobody is allowed to say anything is good in my book.
Well, I changed my mind now.
No, I'm with Martyn. I hate that soundtrack. I hated that film as well, to be fair.
I'm not a big fan. I'm just kind of forced to watch it.
It's just a completely unnecessary film. It doesn't say anything, you know. It doesn't teach. There's no life lesson. It's just a vehicle for bad blues rock music. You know, it's just no. It's a no for me. I'm with Martyn and Dave and Alex, clearly. So it's all of us against Dan.
Yeah, I'm the sole defender of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but yeah, it is what it is. And you guys don't like it, but I think it's great. Dave, want to know what your worst soundtrack is of all time?
Okay, so a bit like Tom, I was caught between two for the absolute worst, but I'm going to first of all talk about the one I didn't choose, which was any film starring Will Smith.
Yeah. I should have thought of that.
Whenever the bastard has got anything to do with the soundtrack, Men in Black 3 and Wild Wild West being the two main offenders.
Nah, Wild Wild West is not a tune.
Desperado Jim West, no thank you. Yeah, he basically samples flipping Stevie Wonder in nearly every fucking thing he does. He just takes very obvious samples and makes it of a... But the guy in his day when he was 18, 19, when he's got Jazzy Jeff as his producer, produced some okay songs, and
Boom Shake the Room.
Yeah, and getting jiggy with it, I don't mind. And there's a few others which is fine. Miami's a bit dodgy, but the rest of the stuff that he's then gone on, because he's an actor. There used to be a story with Jazzy Jeff always gets thrown out of The Fresh Prince by Uncle Phil.
Yeah.
But that joke is based upon management throwing Jazzy Jeff out of Will's place, because obviously he's going out and partying with Jazz all the time and doing music projects and making like no money, basically, and just getting pissed with him when he could be doing fucking films and making millions.
Yeah.
So the management were always getting him to not hang around with him because he was just a bad influence, basically.
This may be a bit off subject because Will Smith came up. I've got to ask, do you reckon Will Smith has got to that point that Samuel Jackson's got to now, where he hasn't made a good film in so long, he's no longer likable? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They get to that point where Samuel Jackson has been cruising off Pulp Fiction for way too long. You know what I mean? And Will Smith is at that point where you go, I can't remember a film I liked him in.
What he seems to be doing at the moment is living his life with Jada Smith as his failed relationship. Yeah. As having interviews on YouTube and having like an open wound of them, everyone looking at their relationship. It was really bizarre. And his son Jaden has got a dodgy music career as well.
Well, they keep trying to make us like Jaden, but he's just incredibly unlikable because no one can really get on board with just some young rich kid wanting to be rich and famous like his dad. How can you want to support someone like that?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's nepotism, isn't it? Nepotism is never a good thing. Never a good thing, because you'll get it's the opposite of the Tim Buckley, Jeff Buckley thing. Sometimes the gene of genius travels down through the genes, but Jaden's...
The genius gene, I don't think, was present with young William. so it hasn't travelled to Jaden.
You know, he was never a great rapper, was he? He was all right.
He was a lucky bastard.
He was very lucky.
He got befriended Quincy Jones, basically, and got the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air because Quincy Jones was coked up and fucking said, I'm pissed, and was just seen him and really liked him. And he'd taken a story about this guy who'd moved from Watts to Bel-Air. That was the premise. And the actual original script was Sir Morris Day from the time. So
that would have been amazing.
It was originally called I Ain't Got the Time.
I would have absolutely loved to have watched that show. I could watch Morris Day
So it was a failed pilot for that. So Quincy was looking for a young black talent to take that spot, and he just happened to be around because he just hung around near where Quincy Jones would be. And when Quincy was pissed up and coked up at a house party that he had, he was just like, right, you boy, you can do an interview now with the head of ABC. And they just hired him on the spot because he just like coke talked him and been like, you need to do an audition. He's like, I can't do an audition. And he said, well, you've got 10 minutes to do an audition. Just do it now and you could change your life. And he just did it, got the job. But
I just love the idea.
The luckiest bastard.
Like the way you said it then, it was just like, hey, do this, do this. I'd love to have heard the actual one when he's actually coked up. Hey man, let's do this. Made me fucking.
Oh yeah, he's an absolute animal. If you see interviews with Quincy Jones now, the fucking bastard's in like his mid-80s or whatever.
Yeah, he's become very
still boozing. He's still coking. He's still shagging. He's just the man is unstoppable.
Don.
Quincy Jones is a true legend. A true legend.
Men in Black 3 was on my hate list, but not because of Will Smith, but more because of Danny Elfman. But you're like, we both arrived at the same destination.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pitbull Back in Time for Men in Black 3 is also a very low point.
Yeah. Pitbull is a low point.
Well, the other single from Men in Black 3 is Black Suits Come In, Nod Your Head. That was the absolute worst.
Men in Black 2, yeah. I remember that one. It was just, he seemed to capture success with the first Men in Black tune, and then there was expected that there would be another one every film, and then they just...
Which is Forget Me Not sample, isn't it? And
one of my favourite my favourite bass line of all time. That is,
it's a great bass line.
It's insane. I think it was played by Freddie Washington. The original?
No. Patrice Rushen was a bass player herself. She played bass, man.
She didn't play bass on that track, though. I have fact-checked it, and I was right. It was played by Freddie Washington on the original.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Appointed fact-checker.
I learned a couple of things today. Jeff Buckley was 30 when he died, and Patrice Rushen didn't do that.
Fact-checked. That fact has been checked.
Anyway, the piece that I have fallen on as my worst soundtrack is all Bond soundtracks ever, with the absolute worst being Garbage, The World Is Not Enough.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh,
You are completely correct in this. Bond music is just rubbish. Every last one of them is rubbish. Like,
No, I disagree. Duran, right?
View to a Kill.
Rubbish, Martin. I'm saying it louder now. Rubbish.
Hang on.
Great.
Now, the reason I've selected it...
Even better is Aha's Living Daylights.
The reason that I've selected them is it's had some high points. So the Bond kind of intro song has become a thing now. So when the movies were big, aside from the fact of Bond is shit, we'll get onto that in a minute. When the movie was big, you had some big hits with Shirley Bassey and the other bands that we've mentioned. And those are songs which are in their own right are great. But to carry this on is, okay, we need this huge like intro track, and we're just going to take whoever's big in the charts when the film comes out, and they have to live up to this president. A lot of them don't, and the president that was set was shit in the first place, to be honest. So they're trying to ascertain this level of musicality which doesn't never really existed in the first place. You know, it's kind of a faux sort of Vegas showroom style, like big auditorium sound that they're trying to get to. So it's making pop bands trying to be like Vegas showrooms acts, and it hasn't worked in a lot of cases. And that Garbage track, although I do like the band, the song is terrible.
I think you have I don't think it's possible for a human being to say anything more correct than what you just said then. Yeah. Like it's all these bands where what's the point? It could be anyone. Who cares? But you get a random pop singer to try and be all nuanced and clever and a bit sophisticated and it's so try hard that as soon as you could, if you told me, oh, by the way, just listen to this, I would know it's a Bond tune without any other background information because it just has that vibe.
They have a progression and C chord, and then it has a crescendo and it comes back down again, and it's all very operatic and.
Yeah, I mean the modern ones are the worst culprits. I mean you've had Skyfall.
Adele was also a terrible example.
But the Jack White and Carano one that they did.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Quantum of Solace, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's well, why are you doing that, man? You're an accomplished musician.
I quite like Billie Eilish. The new one's okay. It's probably the least.
Whenever I see someone take the job, basically, it's obviously a well-paid gig, and it's normally a band that I quite like. I just think, oh, come on, you're better than that.
You know who isn't better than that, and I think who could reinvent Bond themes.
I say
they did it with Mission Impossible. They can do it again.
Exactly. They've just got a track record.
Also, to get on the fact that I just think Bond films are the shittest things in the world. He's misogynistic. He's an absolute shit spy for a kickoff. If he's a spy, why is he telling everyone his name twice? That's the fucking stupid thing.
He's that good a spy, it doesn't matter if they know his name. Who cares? He's that good.
Also, how's he going to know if his martini's shaken or stirred?
And if you have martinis, because I've worked in cocktail bars for years, shaken is the worst because you break the ice up and then you have all these kind of ice fragments on the top of it, which isn't nice. Stirred is much better. So
but Bond likes it.
He's just wrong on everything. He's just an idiot. He's zipping in and out with his shit gadgets and his crap cars and his crap suits and just being a cunt to everyone he meets and telling them his name twice, which is surely golden rule number 1 of spy school.
I want to wade in a little bit here on the James Bond soundtracks because I agree on the intro music. If you ever want a really good laugh, Blondie tried to be the band to write, I think it's View to a Kill. Blondie wrote a song to be the Bond theme for View to a Kill that didn't get picked up. And they released it on one of their albums in the I think it's mid to late 80s, and it's fucking awful. But on a completely different note, so when I think of soundtracks, there are lots of soundtracks where there is one track on it that I fucking hate. And in James Bond, it's always the intro song. Mm-hmm. But actually, as their main composers, I just did a little Google, Hans Zimmer is actually on to do the music for the main.
Hans Zimmer, he's amazing, Tom.
Yeah, what a guy. He's your boy. You really like him, don't you?
I hate his stuff, but he's on to do the soundtrack for the newest film. But
that's good. He's good.
No, he's not. But the composers who've done the previous stuff. John Barry did most of the original music. He wrote all the main themes for James Bond. And although I don't like that music, he did win Academy Awards for the music for Born Free, which, although not my thing, is a pretty iconic piece of film music. I think we can agree. You know, if you've heard, you will know the song Born Free from the film Born Free. You will know it.
I've never heard of the film Born Free.
You will know it. Like Dave.
I know.
Yeah, John Barry wrote that, and he also wrote the music for most of the James Bond films. And in the 90s and the early 2000s was David Arnold, who actually has done some good classical music. He's collaborated with some weird people over the years, David Arnold. He's collaborated with Massive Attack, Bjork, Chris Cornell. Great. Yeah, and he's done the bulk of it. So although I agree with you on the intro songs for the James Bond films, the bulk of the music during the film, I actually
composed by Hans Zimmer.
Not Hans Zimmer. He hasn't released none of the James Bond films.
Greatest of all time.
None of the James Bond films that have yet been released have had Hans Zimmer on them. It's all been David Arnold and John Barry. George Martin did one as well.
He's a close personal friend of mine, Hans, and he sent me some of the music he's working on for the latest film. He has confirmed he's going to have a lot of layered trumpets.
There are some good Bond themes, though. I do like A View to a Kill by Duran Duran. I do like Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon. Although I think I might like that just because of the use in Alan Partridge, where he watches the film and sings it magnificently.
He's script like picture books the whole thing.
Yeah.
Parachute comes, boom, it's a Union Jack. Lovely.
Oh, a bit of bush.
Not too much. What was that? Gone next. Too close.
Was it like Goldfinger, the man with the Midas touch?
I really hate the Shirley Bassey Bond themes. Aha's Living Daylights is by far the best one, and if you get their live album, I think it's called How Can I Sleep with Your Voice in My Head, they do like a 9-minute version of The Living Daylights where they do a reggae version of it, and it's fucking fantastic.
I will be checking that out.
Madonna's Dying of a Day was also a crap one.
That was awful.
That was a crap one.
It was also We Have All the Time in the World. I think that was from a Bond film. Louis Armstrong. That's quite good to talk. Al, what's your nomination for the worst soundtrack of all time? Then?
The worst. Okay, well, this is really hard for me because the only soundtracks I ever remember are the ones that I like. Like, so if it's bad, I probably won't remember. My girlfriend is ridiculously into musicals. Like, I've seen Wicked live because that's how much she likes musicals.
Yeah, so have I, man. It's not a thing to get dragged to.
I hate them, but I've seen a lot. Right?
Can I interject a minute? I've got a very funny story. I once went around the house a couple of times,
Really?
and the line that wrote me was, "Oh, let's go back and watch a film." I was thinking, okay, I know what's going on here. Went back to her house and she put on Phantom of the Opera, which I'd never seen, and I hate musicals with a passion, so my penis drove me to watch a film that I would never normally watch. I got halfway through it, absolutely hated it, and at the end of the film, she went, "Okay, well, time for you to go home." What? I never called that girl or ever rang her again. And I had a very awkward meeting with her once about a week later, and she bumped into me and was like, "Why haven't you called? Why haven't you done this?" And I was just like, "Well, you watched me watch fucking Phantom of the Opera, and then I buggered off home." So that was the end of it as far as I was concerned.
That's like, what's the female equivalent for that would be like, "Oh, I made you come home, watch like Commando and Red Heat back to back, and then just said, oh, by the way, can you pay for your taxi home?"
We watched Predator and had a farting competition, and I kicked her out at 2 a.m. And I wonder why she hasn't rung back.
And then the manager made me a fry-up or something. There's no like...
I gave her a Bombay Bad Boy and a can of Special Brew. I don't know why she hasn't called.
I think it was maybe because having viewed an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, your genitals no longer function for at least 24 hours.
No,
it must be.
It's gone back inside me.
So, like, I've done a lot of things like this where I've not particularly wanted to, but love is a strange thing, or just not the ability to say no because I've got nothing else going on. I've even seen Hamlet live with Benedict Cumberbatch. I hate Shakespeare. God. I hate Shakespeare, but we actually watched it, and she said every scene she had to teach me what it meant because every sentence will pause, and I just go, "What does that mean?"
Bite my thumb at you, sir.
Oh God, it's a nightmare. But anyway, so out of all
you
the
can bite my arse and fuck off while you're doing it, you pretentious cunt.
It wasn't pretentious when it was written, though. I'm going to stick up for Shakespeare here. I love Shakespeare.
It was pretentious when he's written. He's making up new words as he goes along. Imagine going to a play and someone just uses a new word you've never heard before that someone has to explain to you. So it was pretentious when it came out. He's a fool, and I wished he'd burnt down in the theatre along with it. The bastard.
I'm glad he's dead.
I'm sorry, but anyone who wears a ruff is always going to be described as pretentious. You can't wear a ruff without being pretentious.
You can't wear a ruff.
Dan, have you never worn a ruff? If you've never worn a ruff, Dan, I'd be very, very disappointed.
I haven't, but I will be fashioning one for the next episode.
He poked his head through a doily once.
I just look like a shuttlecock.
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 I'm with Alex on musical theatre. So I actually worked in musical theatre for years. So I was a musical director for various theatre companies.
I'm
So
sorry.
I've done it, and I know. I hate most musicals. There's a couple that are all right, but none that you'd have heard of. Most of the ones that anyone's heard of, I hate with a passion. But I will stick up for Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is written as poetry. So making up words to fit your meter is a fairly common device in poetry even today. I mean, you're not having a go at the guy who wrote A Clockwork Orange for making up words. Yet
I can do.
You could, but the book's a classic and it's a great book. Yet
Anthony Burgess.
Yeah, but it's written in a made-up language, but it all makes sense.
It's great.
Yeah, and so
But he's making up the made-up language because it's in the future, and he's thinking what things are going to be like in the future, and that's why they all listen to classical music and do it.
Yeah, but
Shakespeare was just being a twat and trying to confuse.
No, he's making up words. He's making up words with a knowable, with an understandable meaning.
Oh, codswallop.
Yeah, dude, you know what codswallop means, and it's a made-up word. All words are made up. You can make them up. I could make one up tomorrow, you know?
Let's flummox them on.
Well, I'll continue because my girlfriend's actually home from work in a minute, so I need to slag off this before she gets home.
Let's do it quietly.
So it's actually my worst that I've heard, because I've only heard it just in her car, because I don't really listen to, I can't think of any like film soundtracks which really off the top of my head is awful, but it's Pitch Perfect 2.
Oh yeah.
We need to save you from this relationship. How are you surviving?
Yeah.
Are you chained to a radiator?
Yeah, I am. So basically, there's this one song in it, and I actually caught it on telly the other day, and we just had to watch it because it was on, and she likes it. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll sit here and watch it. And they've got this one song, and it's just basically like a mashup of it's like they're doing like a hip hop night. And I hate covers anyway. So people covering songs I hate, but people doing a cappella I hate even more. And then all these like hip hop songs, they just mash one after the other, like 20 of them. And it's the most hideous scene in the cinema history. And everyone watching who likes this sort of stuff will be like, oh wow, that's so clever. How did they do that? But for someone who isn't impressed by it, I'm actually raging, but I actually went, I'm having a hard time explaining how much I hated that scene. And I hear it in the car every now and again when we're driving somewhere, because she has it on shuffle and
pops it on. Oh, goody, our favourite. And you're just like, I'm going to do you a little favour. There's a word that just says, no, thank you, or I'm going to the pub for a week. See you later.
But yeah, I think that must be it. I haven't really got any bad ones. When you guys are talking, I'm getting more ideas for bad ones. Like when you said about Will Smith films and stuff, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's kind of bad. And Bond films, fair enough. This might be a bit controversial, but I think the Queen song, like the Flash Gordon, is shit.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
It just doesn't really fit a sci-fi action epic, does it?
No.
This is really campy music. It doesn't make sense.
Have you seen the film, Alex?
I've seen it once, but I can't remember anything about it, so it must have been 7.
After we had this discussion last time, did anybody check out that album I recommended?
Hot Space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
I've actually heard it before, because it's the one that John Deacon, sorry. It's one he was
the only one that's any good.
Because after Another One Bites the Dust, where he pretty much said, right, we're just doing this, it's going to sound like disco, we're having it. They made that album afterwards because it was one of the most popular singles they ever did, if not the.
Yeah.
And then it just completely tanked because no one liked it except, Dave. So. I
quite like it.
Listen to someone gave me the album and I was like, oh, I fucking hate Queen. I put it on. I listened to, what's the band? Went to the year 3000, Idiots.
Busted.
They did an 80s synth album that someone gave to me a few years back. And I thought, oh, this is actually quite nice. When you're pleasantly surprised that it's not as shit as you imagine, but it doesn't mean that the original product is good. Do you know?
Yeah. My choice comes out from similar path to what Al has just talked about with musicals, because the worst album for me, the worst movie soundtrack, is Mamma Mia.
Mate,
because
I'm with you on that.
It's everywhere. So I don't ever want to hear Pierce Brosnan sing, to bring up James Bond again. I don't ever want to hear Pierce Brosnan sing.
Fuck you, Bronholm.
Meryl Streep is an incredible actress, but No, not in that film. I've been subjected to the movie before. It's a shit movie.
I'd say the sequel's even worse because they put all the decent songs in the first one.
Yeah, Mamma Mia. It's got they're very mediocre vocalists as actors. The performers on it. I love ABBA. I think they were a great band, and they did some of the best singles of the 70s and were very important to pop music. I don't want to hear them sung badly by actors. No. I don't want to hear them with Greek arrangements, and I don't want everybody to be so into it that that the movie's on all the time. I've caught it on a Sunday and it's just terrible, and the songs are awful. The fact that everyone plays those versions of songs is something I just can't fathom why that happens. Why would you ever listen to Pierce Brosnan singing it against Agnetha? Or it just doesn't make any sense why it's so popular.
There was a real spate, I think, in the late 90s, early 2000s of turning bands' back catalogues into musicals, because they did one for Madness as well.
Yeah.
Madness, Queen, ABBA.
And on a side note, if you've seen Madness live in the last 5 years, they kind of do a mega mix of all their tracks, which is really horrible. And it's like a sound in the background. They play a video which has kind of got all this idiosyncrasy British stuff like double-decker buses and post boxes and things. It's really turgidly blighty.
They've gone a bit Jive Bunny.
Yeah.
Just to kind of sum up what we've been discussing, if you can sum up what we've done so far, I think musicals seem to be a recurrent theme. I don't think there's anybody on the podcast that does like musicals. I mean, I certainly don't. A lot of people assume that I do, maybe because of my flamboyant ways, but I'm not a fan of musicals. I'm putting it on the record for the public to hear. Please do not ask me if I want to listen to a musical or any of the movies that are coming out, like yesterday with the Beatles stuff and the Rocket Man.
Yeah, that was horrific.
Yeah, there's that Blinded by the Light Bruce Springsteen one as well. I don't want to listen to any of them. I don't want anybody to ever tell me to listen to them because I'm not going to. So don't waste your time. I don't like musicals. I don't like anything that sounds
agreed.
Cool.
I feel kind of bad though, because it feels like there's just us five who've just all decided we just hate musicals. I feel like we need someone who likes musicals to defend them. We might have to have another episode of just having someone. It just seems so one-sided, doesn't it? Like my girlfriend loves them, and they are so popular. I feel like we need to get someone to argue their case.
Okay, I'll have a go. Having worked in that industry for 15 years, I think I did in musical theatre. Potentially, may do again. So the reason why not to hate musicals is the same reason why people like Queen or the Rocky Horror Picture Show. When you go and see them live, it is entirely possible, right? I've done it many times. I've been to see a band that I hated, like Dragon Force. Okay, I hate Dragon Force. I had to see them live because I was reviewing them. It was awful, but I actually had a good time. And the reason I had a good time is I was there with other. It's like a cult, right? You're there with other people who enjoy it as well, so you enjoy it too, and then you spread that contagion across the world, right? And I think that's what musicals do. It allows people to get together and enjoy something in a live setting. I don't think there's any need for musicals to be made into films, though. I agree with you.
Yeah. I think it works as a stage. Yeah. As a stage,
absolutely. A musical written as a theatre, and you think a lot of musicals that we listen to today were around in the time before film. So, like Rogers and Gilbert and Sullivan. Sorry, Sullivan died. Arthur Sullivan died in 1900. So Gilbert and Sullivan is written before the era of the film, and so for what it was of its time, it's really quite good. And Rodgers and Hammerstein are in sort of the golden age, like the golden age of cinema, and it's quite good. But it's written for the stage. It's not written to be a film. And I think putting these things on film is a pointless exercise.
Let's talk about some of the good things. I think we've talked about the bad things for long enough. So I'm going to ask you, Tom, what is your favourite movie soundtrack of all time?
Right, so this was a really tough one because, like I said, I had my 4 groupings. The musical movies, so like the Beatles, The Who, I actually don't really like any of them because as a film, they don't work that well because it's music written, it's a concept album put to film. So I don't really like any of them that much. There are some great mixtape soundtracks, Train Spotting, Singles, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, or my personal favourites would be what Sofia Coppola did with Lost in Translation or Marie Antoinette.
Really good.
Marie Antoinette is probably the best of them.
I like Lost in Translation as well, though.
Yeah. Then there's a weird crossover between the classical and the rock soundtracks. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet actually has a cracking soundtrack because it's
that's good.
Massive Attack with Craig Armstrong, who's a really great classical composer. And actually some of the stuff that Max Richter's been doing with soundtracks is really good as well. Then classical soundtracks, Philip Glass's soundtrack for The Hours would be up there with my favourites. Michael Nyman's soundtrack for the piano is beautiful. Gabriel Yared is one of my favourite film composers. His work for Cold Mountain's brilliant. But the rock type soundtracks are where I'm going to go. So it was a really tough call because Mogwai's Zidane, a 21st Century Portrait.
Nice choice.
Basically a piece of music over a football match, and it's brilliant. Explosions in the Skies soundtrack to Friday Night Lights is brilliant. But my favourite soundtrack, I'm actually going to go for, it's actually a computer game, and Dan said I was allowed this in the group chat.
Yeah.
This is a soundtrack album I listened to as an album that won awards when it came out. The computer game it's for is a computer game that has a lot of hate. It's a computer game called No Man's Sky, and the soundtrack by 65 Days of Static is possibly one of the best soundtracks of anything ever made. I'm
actually going to play it soon, so I'll look out for it now.
It is one of the best soundtracks. It's the soundtrack album of it on its own is amazing to listen to. I could easily have gone for 65 Days of Static, did a soundtrack to the film Silent Running as an alternative soundtrack that's brilliant. But no, we're going for 65 Days of Static soundtrack to No Man's Sky. It's a electronic post-rock banger of an album with some amazing soundscape work, some great beats and things. It's just that's got to be the one. It's composed, it's designed to go with the things that are going on around it. It works. It's designed with the motion of the game in mind. It's like the best soundtracks, like the best classical soundtrack. Let's use a brilliant example. Bela Bartok's soundtrack for The Shining is iconic, right? Mm-hmm. Because of what it does to build tension and how the beats follow the movement on the screen. And 65 Days of Static have managed to do that in a computer game, and that is really fucking hard to do. And they've done it really well. So yeah, best soundtrack, 65 Days of Static, No Man's Sky. And if you haven't, just listen to the soundtrack album. Dave, I imagine you'd really dig it. It's got like hints.
Yeah, I've played the game and I've listened to the soundtrack on it. It's really good. Yeah.
I'd imagine that's one of the few pieces of music that we will agree on.
There's a lot of good video game soundtracks. Like the Final Fantasy series is usually quite high quality. I think 8 is my favourite soundtrack. Not my favourite Final Fantasy game by any stretch, but 8 has got a particularly good soundtrack. 7, obviously, I'm a massive Final Fantasy.
They often do parties where they do it live, don't they, with an orchestra?
Also, special mention to the soundtrack for Silent Hill 2, which is just this weird... It's all very ambient sounds building up a sense of dread for what is an absolutely terrifying experience.
How can no one be mentioning the soundtracks to Tony Hawk's Wander Free?
Oh, they were great.
They made a generation, man.
Let's not go too deep on video games because you might stumble across my choice in a minute.
Okay.
Have we all chosen video games instead of films. Oh, that's all right then. I did make some honourable mention films. I was going to talk about David Lynch films, but I'll stick to Toto and Dune, and I'll leave the rest to Martyn, because I'm sure Martyn will be bringing up David Lynch.
Yeah.
Go on then, Martyn. What have you got?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to mention David Lynch, to be honest with you. I did think about David Lynch. Obviously, the Lost Highway soundtrack is something else. With the David Bowie, I'm Deranged, it's just the way that film opens with the white lines going past really fast, and like the lettering, and David Bowie's I'm Deranged. It's just such a great way to open a film. And there's so many good things in that film. So many good songs. 9 Inch Nails, obviously, in it. But I'm not going to go with David Lynch, actually. I did think about it because Lynch and music go so well hand in hand. You only have to look at the last season of Twin Peaks.
Yes.
To know, they always ended every episode with a song, Chromatics and all those guys. And obviously my favourite of those was episode 8, where it opened with 9 Inch Nails.
That's incredible.
It's just unbelievable.
Surprise.
Absolutely unbelievable. It's a great moment in my life seeing that on a 52-inch screen in the dark. It was great. But no, I'm going to go with... I'm going to do some honourable mentions first. So Superfly, Curtis Mayfield.
Yeah, great album.
Undeniable, just incredible album in its own right. It didn't even need to be a soundtrack. It's just a great album.
Mm.
Also, Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man is
fucking Martyn, good.
I know, it's so amazing.
I used to have that as my MySpace page loop. That song.
Did you really? Wow, that's pretty cool, man. It is really good. It's just that whole urban, blaxploitation thing, unbelievable. Moving on that and on from that, and really related to it, is in the early 90s you had a lot of there were a lot of films about the whole gang things, the gang scene in LA, and so you had a lot of hip hop soundtracks. The first of which I absolutely loved, 1987, was Colours, which was all about
Ice-T.
Yeah, Ice-T was on it.
Great story about him with coming in with that. He'd was actually a real life pimp in a gang at the time, and he'd been offered the role in Colours. And I think the line from he was saying in some documentary I was watching is he was saying, no, man, I'm making however much money a day doing this shit or whatever. And those guys that he was with was like, nah, Ice Man, you need to do that because white people like you.
Yeah. And that's the thing. White people did like him. And he released an album, didn't he, called Home Invasion. And one of the themes was about how hip-hop at that time, especially gangster rap, was particularly being lapped up by, your middle-class white guys.
I did a cover in a punk band that I was in called The Bitch Tried to Kill Me, which is a song he did.
Oh, I know that song very well. Yeah, it's a good song, actually. There are problematic things about early hip-hop, but, you've got to look at it in the context of the time and the culture. So you had Boys in the Hood as well, which was incredible. Ice Cube.
That was really good.
He starred in the film, and it's actually a heartbreaking film. You watch it, it's extremely emotional. It really brings home that whole, young people dying for no reason in the hood. I
watched Clockers again in the week. Spike Lee,
great. Yeah. Spike Lee. Do the Right Thing as well. Spike Lee, Public Enemy. That's more East Coast, but just as important. You had New Jack City as well, which Ice-T starred in. Some of these films aren't so great, but the soundtracks are incredible.
Yeah, really good.
A film called Juice as well, which was, again, a Tupac in it. And
that film is absolutely fucking incredible. Samuel L. Jackson's in it as well. Juice is fucking good, man. It's one of those shitty hip hop films that gets lumped in with everything, but it's really good. Tupac's amazing in it.
I love those sort of films.
Juice is the one. Juice is real good.
Juice is good. You also had the soundtrack to it. The film isn't so great. It's all right. A bit of kind of B-movie crime film. It's called Judgment Night, but the soundtrack is something special because every song on it is a collaboration between a rock band and a hip hop act. So you had actually really, really good underground rock bands with these big hip hop acts that were coming out. So you had like Pearl Jam, the Cypress Hill, Dinosaur Jr. playing with crikey, I can't remember. Again, I haven't like really kind of prepared too well to look into the track list, but the Judgment Night soundtrack was really important because at that time you had bands like Rage Against the Machine coming out, you had the Anthrax and Public Enemy collaboration, and you know, this is all moving on from the whole rap and rock thing, you know, which was now, I mean, it went on to, unfortunately, new metal, but it was important back then because it was this bringing together of these two massive cultures. You know, you had your metalheads, your rock heads coming together with, you know,
I remember a Cypress Hill album called Skull and Bones, and they had hip hop one side and rock the other.
Yeah,
I love that album. Love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. So you had all these really, really great hip-hop soundtracks back then. They were amazing. They were absolutely incredible. And, you know, very much compilation albums, like Tom was saying about a kind of like an album where you had a lot of different songs, but it was like a compilation. You also had, back then, the Crow soundtrack is great. There was some amazing stuff on the Crow soundtrack.
Yeah, that's
very
good.
Alternative rock. You know, that was really cool. And also back then, I'll talk about Singles quickly, because again, it's a compilation album. Singles was really important to me because it came out exactly the same time that I was just getting into the whole grunge scene. So you've got, you know, it starts off with Wood by Alice in Chains. You know, it's got the big three of the big four grunge bands on it. There's no Nirvana songs on it, which is strange, but then Nirvana, I guess, were kind of different to the scene of like the Alice in the Temple of Pearl Garden scene that was going on. So Singles is amazing. So I'm going to talk about my favourite soundtrack of all time, because it's linked to my favourite film of all time, and it's something that has got me through the darkest days of my life. And you know, it's my go-to whenever anything goes wrong. And
Spice World.
It is Spice World. You're dead right. It is Spice World. So the thing about Spice World was, Baby Spice.
Mel B really came into her own that one.
Yeah.
Love the Simon Cowell cameo.
Gary Glitter's in that movie. They cut him out with the theatrical release.
Keeps getting better.
That makes it for me, man. I love a bit of paedophilia in my music. But
we know.
It's Into the Wild by Eddie Vedder. It's no surprise to anybody that knows me, but it's just the most cohesively beautiful album that fits the film, I've heard anyway. You have to kind of like, if you've seen the film, the album complements it, but the film also complements the album, so it works both ways. The cinematography by Sean Penn in Into the Wild is just stunning. Just the American landscapes, and you know, this journey of this guy. He's doing all these things, traveling around America, which is, you know, for me, my ultimate dream. I would love to be able to just fuck off to America and walk around forever. So I do the next best thing. I walk around Cornwall forever. And I listen to this album, and it's so pastoral. It's so like, it's just so natural. It's just so incredible.
I'm glad that you said that, because I often equated your cycling trips and Dartmoor trips, whatever, with you being into that film. And I watched it only because you're into it, basically. I didn't actually know Eddie Vedder had done the soundtrack at all. So I only watched it at the beginning of lockdown because I saw your poster in the background and saw that you liked it, and it was on Netflix, and it was always recommended to me, and I never got round to watching it. But yeah, it's a really, really good film. I liked it.
It's a good film. It's based on a true story, and I get a lot of stick for it because Chris McCandless, who is kind of a hero of mine, but he probably shouldn't be, because he was just a naive young man who didn't really know what he was doing, but his morals were true, and he was like a beautiful man who was just naive and went and did this silly thing and ended up dying, and he didn't need to die. You know, it was just very silly. And a lot of the Alaskans, when he died, they were quite angry. Also related to that is they've now flown. They've taken the bus away from where it was. Where he
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, because so many people were going there doing the whole I'm going to be Chris McCandless and do that, and they were like getting into trouble. And then you had the Alaskans who actually live there and have to make a living, and you know the mountain rescue people having to go out and rescue these people, these stupid people, and you know that's a real shame because like you know I planned to go out and see this bus, you know, but I would have gone guided. To be fair, I wouldn't have just walked there. I would have got people to take me there. But anyway, I digress. The story goes that you know Sean Penn and Eddie Vedder were good friends anyway before the film was made. And Sean Penn got in touch with Eddie Vedder and he said, I'm making this film about this guy. Eddie Vedder read the story about the guy and was kind of interested. And he basically just sat there on a stool in front of the screen showing the film, which again is just so beautiful to look at. And he just kind of came up with this stuff. And Eddie Vedder himself said he wasn't really that emotionally attached to it, but it was kind of one of the easiest things he'd ever had to do. Just basically pumped it out. He just came out with these songs, but they're incredible and they're just so full of heart.
This soundtrack wasn't just like I enjoyed this. This was like a life-altering sort of moment. Like,
Yes,
I guess that's the highest form of praise you can have for like a soundtrack, isn't it?
It is.
Just,
I mean,
it changed my life. There's before this soundtrack and after, you know, like
yeah, definitely. And before the soundtrack and the film, they both come together for me. They're both one in the same almost. Just about a guy he's troubled in whatever way he's troubled, and he's just trying to find truth in the world, and he's just going out and just trying to find like this sense of belonging and sense of meaning in life. And the film, the story represents it. The story of Chris McCandless represents that. And Eddie Vedder just did such a good job of, like, I mean, a bit of background. Chris McCandless was a very, very clever man. I mean, he was very gifted, and his majors in his, you know, he graduated in things like political science and things like that. He was very troubled by what was going on in the world politically and socially, and that was what was really driving him. And Eddie Vedder is very much the same. It's very much that whole, like, the social injustice in the world, you know, the whole political injustice in the world. So it makes sense that Eddie Vedder soundtracked that film.
Want to get on to talking about someone else's favourite movie soundtrack. So, Al, if you'd be so kind as to offer us what you bring into the panel this evening.
Well, I don't think I could get as deep as these guys got, but my favourite of all time it's going to be really, really dumb. I do own it and I listen to it like all the time still. It's not like anything clever where it's like made specifically. Well, obviously the soundtrack's made for the film, but it's more of like just a compilation CD. Yeah. But Office Space easily has the best soundtrack ever.
I need to see that film.
That is a great soundtrack.
I need to see that film so much.
You know the scene when he wrecked that photocopier? Like, that music is the photocopy wrecking music. Like, everyone remembers that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a scene in the film where he's like singing Ghetto Boys, so it's like back up in your ass with a resurrection, and he's just like this guy, this ultimate white guy, just like dropping N-bombs the entire time until a black person walks past his car and he has to like quickly dip the windows and then he locks the door because he gets intimidated by the black guy outside of his door. Like, honestly, that soundtrack's amazing. It's got like it's just got loads of Ghetto Boys songs on it, really.
The Ghetto Boys were amazing. The Ghetto Boys were an incredible hip-hop band. Like,
the song about Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster is just the most chilled out, awesome rap song I've probably ever heard. Like, they've got Still by, is it Ice Cube Still? I did have this all looked up because the problem is I listened to it and then that's just kind of it.
It was NWA, man.
No, it's like... Well, anyway, it's just my favourite soundtrack of all time. It's the best compilation of rap songs I've never heard previously to listening to it.
You need to listen to a track on that subject called Too Short is the artist with a $sign for the S. Get in it. You'll love it.
Yeah?
Yeah. He's an old OG, absolute legend in that field. You'll like it.
Oh, right, yeah, you have to send me a link so I remember. That'd be amazing. Because I love that sort of era of rap music. As far as like soundtracks which aren't, well, I guess aren't just compilations, I haven't got too many because there's loads of like films I like where I can specifically remember the soundtrack being amazing. Like it's like Blade Runner 2 recently. Like the soundtrack for that is incredible. I mean, it's going to be Hans Zimmer, Tom, your favourite. But I love the soundtrack for Interstellar. Like that scene when the spacecrafts are like they're spinning at the same time and they're going to connect. I can't remember what that song's called, but that's just amazing. It's one of the best songs for a film I've ever heard. It's better than some classical trained orchestras, I think, Tom. They're probably better. I think it's actually good.
It's performed by a classically trained orchestra, Alex. What you're actually trying to say is it's better than some other classical compositions written for film.
I think it's actually teaching them lessons, Tom. I think you'll agree. That it's actually forcing them to up their game.
It's just a shit cover version, Alex. It's just a shit cover version.
No, I think we agreed upon this earlier. I think I'm right and you're just wrong there.
Have you ever heard Stravinsky's Rite of Spring?
Well, I don't need to because I've got hands in my life, Tom. It doesn't. I don't need to listen to his subpar stuff when I've got hands. If you want to learn where all of the use of brass in modern TV music comes from, just listen to Rite of Spring. It's a great piece of classical music. All right.
Anything by,
add it to the Alex listen list.
add it to the Alex listen list. Anything by Stravinsky that's where a lot.
I love the fact that we've recommended him Too Short and Stravinsky in the same sentence.
Where does that ever happen? Too Short is amazing, by the way.
Another soundtrack. I'm just doing ones I just like off the top of my head, but I actually downloaded it, which is quite a lot for me to download. I really like the Stranger Things soundtrack.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Well, I think that's very good. That's a recent one.
I used to do a club night in Plymouth called Stranger Tunes, which we did like 3 or 4 times. That was all of that soundtrack plus others. So Dan knows I'm a fan of that.
Yeah, I went to one of those nights actually. It was good. I think we'll have a listen to what Dave's got to say about his favourite soundtrack.
All right. So soundtracks are very, very dear to my heart. I've listened to a lot of music based upon solely soundtracks. So I've watched a film and thought, fuck, what's that song? It's really, really good. And often I think the song gets seeded in your head. For me, even harder if you've got a visual accompaniment and it is complementary to the art either side. So I really, really like soundtracks and I've had a lot in the past. So it was really difficult to choose one. The one I've chosen I'll save to the end, but I've got 4, unfortunately. I can't narrow it down any further than 4.
That's fine.
So my first one is a film that I love to pieces. It's 1980. It's Caddyshack.
Oh, yeah.
So Kenny Loggins is another great artist that I've talked about previously. He's basically classed in that yacht rock genre that we won't go back over again, but he's just kind of like an 80s songwriter. But Caddyshack, he was versed with doing the soundtrack of the film, and it's also got a Journey song in it as well, so we can bring it back to Alex. It's got Any Way You Want It, but it's a real party film like Caddyshack. You can tell from when you watch the film that those guys were just on set having a good laugh. I mean, I love Rodney Dangerfield and Bill Murray. They're like some of my favourite comedians. And the soundtrack's just really fun. It's light-hearted, easygoing. If ever I don't know what to watch, I just put that film on.
It's a great film to have your mates round with a few beers.
Yeah. It's easygoing. It's just nothingness, It's kind of like really happy-go-lucky junk food type film. I love it to pieces, but the soundtrack is awesome. It's just Kenny Loggins absolutely owns it, and he was involved in a lot of stuff during the 80s. Basically, he was versed in quite a few films. He actually did a Disney film called Winnie the Pooh's Corner, which he did the whole soundtrack to, and even that's amazing. So if you get a chance, have a look up Kenny Loggins' back catalogue. Also, obviously, he did like Top Gun and Highway to the Danger Zone and loads of other really good things. But yeah, he's a really good songwriter. He's up there with like Michael McDonald, in my opinion, of like 80s artists.
they co-wrote What a Fool Believes, Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins. So.
The second film I'm going to mention is something we've also already talked about, High Fidelity. The soundtrack to that album, that film, is amazing. So many good bands, the Beta Band, Stevie Wonder, 13th Floor Elevators, loads of really, really good bands. I didn't know half of them before I watched the film when it came out in 2000, and learned a lot from it. Basically, it's just, I've got the book. It's a book. The film's based upon a book that was written by an English actor. It's Americanized in the film, but a lot of the stuff is brought back to Blighty, basically, if you read the book, and the soundtrack is done really good. It's about a guy who owns a record shop, basically, and it's looking back on his life, on his failed relationships. But the film's really, really great. The soundtrack is awesome.
It was.
Following Tom's categorization tracks, we've had two. Well, technically, Caddyshack has written High Fidelity as a mixtape per se, but Purple Rain by Prince is my absolute favourite album. It's basically a film and an album together, as Prince wrote both of them. It was then kind of the format is kind of copied by Michael Jackson later on, but it's just an absolute masterpiece. Whenever I've got 5 seconds, I will just put Purple Rain on my DVD setup, which is connected up to my hi-fi, which is set up for music. And you may as well watch the film if you're going to if you're going to play the album. It's just fantastic. It brings me to elation and tears every single time I watch them. It's so good.
I'll admit,
Darling
I'm not the
Nikki's
biggest
on
Prince fan, but I love that film.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I like the album, hate the film.
Oh,
The film has bad elements. The kind of like, it has some cheesy bits and some like, he's kind of violent with Apollonia, and there's a couple off sections, but it resonates with me. I've watched the film since I was a child, so I'm kind of blind to the bad elements of it. I've watched people do YouTube videos on it saying how this bit or that bit is terrible or whatever, but it's the same with Michael Jackson's Moonraker, which was trying to basically do the same thing. Moonwalker, sorry.
Moonraker.
Let's not bring me back to the worst soundtracks of all time. Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I watched them both when I was a child, so I can't separate the bad elements from the good. It's just, it resonates perfectly with me. But the soundtrack that I've decided on, I think mainly for value, because you're going to get an absolute smorgasbord of fucking bangers here, is Grand Theft Auto Vice City. It is the best soundtrack from anything ever. I could listen to all of the radio stations that they had from that band, and they've got a 7 CD track album, but it's fucking brilliant.
Like, I'm currently playing through GTA 5 at the moment, because one of those games I just never played, so I'm going back to. And the radio stations just don't even compare to Vice City.
No.
Like, Vice City was just another level. I think, like, there's not many games where you release every radio station in CD form. You know what I mean? There was like 10 of them out in, like, you go back in the day, like in HMV or something, away by a CD. Yeah. They were just
7 CD compilation, yeah. So the radio stations are V-Rock, Wave 103, Emotion 98.3, Flash FM, Wildstyle Pirate Radio, Fever 105, and Radio Esperanto, and every single one of them is just packed with absolute bangers.
Oh yeah, I actually own V-Rock one. I've got a CD somewhere.
I think I marginally prefer 4, but that's because the GTA 4 soundtrack, because there's a couple of absolute bangers on that I really love. And I think
it's just got like 65 Days of Static on it. So.
No. It's the Radio Broker in GTA 4 has loads of really cool, like, New York punk stuff. An indie and LCD sound system are on there as well.
I mean, whoever is in charge of that, like, fucking knew their onions.
Yeah.
Like, let's just have a look at Emotion 98.3, which is probably not even the best radio station. It's Toto Africa, Jan Hammer's Crockett's Theme, Cutting Crew, I Just Died in Your Arse, Foreigner Waiting for a Girl Like You, Mr. Broken Wings, Roxy Music, More Than This, Squeeze, Tempted, REO, Speedwagon, Keep On Loving You, Luther Vandross, Never Too Much, Kate Bush, Wow, It's like fucking what?
Wow. Wow, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, every track you've just mentioned there, I'd listen to that. Yeah.
Wave 103 is a banger as well. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Two Tribes, Tears for Fears, Pair of Shelter, Blondie, Automatic, Flock of Seagulls, Iran, Human League, Fascination, Psychedelic Furs, Love My Way, Spandau Ballet, Gold, Thomas Dolby, Hyperactive, Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night. Just the guy was an absolute animal, whoever wrote this, whoever put this together.
It's definitely more cohesive than the GTA 4 soundtrack because it's set in an era, and I think it's not trying to be retrospective from that era. It's very much.
But you would think someone that was put constraints on. So if they're a video game, they're like, okay, we're making this video game. It's basically from this particular place and this particular time, and it's kind of a rip off of Scarface or whatever. Make some tracks from that. This guy must have heard those constraints and just thought, fucking, I got this. Those aren't constraints. You've just named my fucking number, and I'm going to absolutely tear you a new bumhole with this list that I've got.
Yeah, he's done
it's
really well done.
It's really, really good. So, like, if you were to par together a DJ list, you couldn't do 80s night better than that.
No.
Oh, no.
You're probably right.
That just leaves us with my contributions for best soundtrack. Are you sitting down?
Drink.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, get ready to drink, people.
There are some soundtracks that I wanted to give as honourable mentions. I really like the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack. I think there's some great songs on there, and it works with the radio segues in there as well. And there's some really good classic rock on there. It's a little bit more bluesy and a little bit more funky. I do like that album. The Forrest Gump soundtrack has a lot of good songs on it that go through the different eras of the film. I mean, that's one of my favourite films anyway. But there's a lot of good songs on there. The Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack is a really good compilation of good R&B and funk singles. So that kind of, I'm not really into superhero movies, but I've seen that film and the soundtrack is really, really good. I think everybody knows that I'm going to talk about one artist and one artist in particular, and I've been waiting for my time to shine on.
Empty glasses, man. I've got empty glasses. Shit.
Should we all just take 10 minutes and leave Whittle here to talk about Prince?
So Dave's already mentioned Purple Rain. Now, Purple Rain isn't actually the album that I'm going to go for, which may surprise some people. I love Purple Rain, and if you had a gun to my head and asked me what the best soundtrack is, I think I would go Purple Rain for the reasons that Dave's already catalogued. It's a very important soundtrack. I mean, it sets the scene for things like 8 Mile coming much later. I think Purple Rain is just groundbreaking. He was the first artist in America to have the #1 single, #1 album, and the #1 movie.
It's just insane when you think about it. The money that must have generated was nuts.
It's absolutely insane. And the album itself stands up as being a great album, whether you listen to it with the film or whether you listen to it separately. It's, for me, I kind of...
a bit of it conjecture. Well, can you say a soundtrack is listenable without film, or the film was watched without the soundtrack? I don't think so. That's the only one you could possibly say it for, I think.
Well, I think that the album I'm actually going to mention as being my favourite does...
Blow me away, please, Whittle.
I'm not going to say what it is yet. There's a couple of others, so people might be thinking... Like,
Under the Cherry Moon, I'm going to be annoyed.
Prepare to be annoyed.
Oh, shit.
I like that film.
Hate that film.
People are thinking about Prince soundtrack, so you're going to say about Purple Rain. Then you've got the Batman soundtrack, which I think is much maligned as being the first misstep in Prince's career, but I actually really love it. And originally it was going to be Michael Jackson versus Prince. They were going to have like Michael Jackson doing some love ballads, and then basically Tim Burton wrote the movie using 1999 and Baby I'm a Star, and when he called up Prince and said, can we use these songs in the movie, Prince said, well, I'll write you 10 songs. So they went with that. And yeah, there's a couple of skippable tracks on it, which is the first in Prince's career.
You heard the story about Bad with Michael Jackson, that Wesley Snipes was originally supposed to be Prince, and the first line of Bad is, your butt is mine. And Prince said, who's singing that to who? Because I ain't singing that to him, and he sure as shit ain't singing that to me. So it will be a no. I'm not in that music video.
Yeah, I would love to have seen that music video though. That would have been a very interesting concept. So yeah, I think Batman gets a bit of a bad rep, but I do love the Batman soundtrack. Scandalous is an incredible song.
Batdance.
Yeah, Batdance is a bit of a pioneering record, really. It's the first mainstream sample record from a major artist to get. Well, it got to number 2. It was number 1 in the US, which is quite surprising, really. And Batman's got some very good songs on it. So Graffiti Bridge comes the year after. I don't like Graffiti Bridge as a movie. It's too close to a musical, but the soundtrack is very good. However, I can't claim that Graffiti Bridge is the best album. Because
He was supposed to have Madonna in that film, but apparently they fell out.
yeah, so it was Ingrid Chavez instead. She does a good role, but the film itself is also filmed at Paisley Park, and it all looks a bit cheap, and it's not the greatest movie. The soundtrack is a bit of a compilation of stuff that he was doing with the time, and Tevin Campbell, Mavis Staples, George Clinton, they're all on that soundtrack. It's great, but it doesn't really work as a cohesive album. It's just more of a kind of mixtape. But the album that I did settle for is, as Dave has said, it's the soundtrack to Under the Cherry Moon. Now, the album itself is called Parade. Under the Cherry Moon, I'm not... The film, I love it as a Prince fan. It showcases his weird sense of humour.
It's like a French noir comedy. That's the only reason I say I was annoyed about it. I think the album Parade obviously is amazing, but the film is just confusing to me.
The film is confusing, and I like it as a diehard Prince fan. But I'm not talking about the movie. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible. It's Prince's first kind of foray into European jazz. It's a very strange album. The first 4 tracks, I think, were recorded in one. The drums were recorded in a single take. Just Prince on the drums, just drummed out the first 4 tracks in one take.
Of course it is. He only knows one drum beat.
Yes, Alex.
It's literally lesson 1. That's the beat that Prince knows. Like if you learn drums, you've learned that first beat. Boom, tss, boom, tss. Rinse, repeat every Prince song.
I don't know. I think stuff like Tambourine and Dance On would prove otherwise. But I think Parade has a special place in my heart because it's like a journey. You listen to Parade and it takes you from this kind of weird French jazz. It's party funk. There's stuff like New Position, which is a funk.
Sometimes it snows in April.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the ultimate album closer for me. It's so tender. You can hear the creaking of the stool that he was sat on. Lisa and Wendy complimenting him so well in just an absolute powerhouse vocal performance, which isn't necessarily what you associate with Prince. It's just very tender, very delicate and very emotional. And that song was kind of really came into its own after he passed in 2016. And it's one that I actually struggle to listen to sometimes because it is quite effective. Parade is something else, and it's so strange. It's a bizarre journey through music in the mind of a musical genius, exploring different elements of music that he'd gone to before. He kind of ditched his funk roots and went in a more experimental art rock kind of direction. But it's got Kiss on it, which is the pinnacle of great singles in the 80s. It's just a minimalist masterpiece that was so accessible, and that song became a massive hit. It still plays...
The Tom Jones.
Yeah, with The Art of Noise, and Prince kind of used what they brought to the song in his later live performances in sort of around the 2000s. He started bringing in elements of The Art of Noise cover. But Prince with Kiss is an absolutely great song, but if you listen to the soundtrack, it sounds nothing like that. I think the closest you've probably got to a commercial song on the album after that, you've got Mountains, which the 12-inch mix, if you've never heard the 12-inch mix of Mountains, do it now.
Yeah, it's Wendy and Lisa on that as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's the whole Revolution, and they expanded the Revolution specifically for parades.
But they wrote it; they weren't just on it.
They were involved in the songwriting process. It's very difficult to kind of work out who wrote what in Prince's back catalogue, because sometimes he would credit people that weren't involved at all to give them kind of credit and make sure that they made money from it. But sometimes he would have performers that were involved in the writing of the song.
Next thing you know, you're going to want to ride his motorcycle.
But yeah, I think Parade is especially brilliant. Mountains, as I've just mentioned, but it's got a fantastic instrumental right in the middle, Venus de Milo. It's one of the most haunting 1 minute 54 songs that I've ever heard. It's just beautiful, and it brings me back to a period of serenity. It kind of echoes the film for me. I love that, but it doesn't have that association if you haven't seen the film. The Revolution's expanded at that point to have people like Miko Weaver, and he's bringing in his bodyguards as the backing dancers. It's just a bigger sound from him. The Parade tour, which accompanied it, was one of the greatest live tours that's ever been done by anyone. He looked cool. That he actually abandoned the guitar for a bit and kind of became the quintessential frontman, better than anybody else was doing, like Michael Jackson. He was just the man on stage with his dancing and the vocal performances. He kind of put the guitar to one side and showcased the Revolution and what they were really doing. It's the final album that they made, although Dream Factory they started making it afterwards. He dropped the Revolution shortly after that. Dream Factory, a lot of the tracks are going to be on the Sign of the Times remaster that's coming out soon, so that's worth checking out for those. Using Parade as a bookend of the Revolution, it was his biggest sound, it was his most daring sound, it was his most experimental sound, brought together in one cohesive, brilliantly flowing album. Gives us an absolute undeniable banger in Kiss, and you've got great singles like Mountains, you've got Another Love, a Hole in Your Head, and Girls and Boys.
Girls and Boys, yeah.
First appearance of a rap in a Prince song as well. He's starting to bring in the saxophone. Eric Leeds is heavily involved in the making of the album. It's a showcase for his bigger aspirations.
I didn't really like that from Prince, that he was trying to lean into rap. I thought that he should just stuck where he was, and he didn't really make a very good effort of it, because he wasn't a rapper, he was a songwriter. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think Prince's 90s efforts into hip-hop yielded some mixed results.
Prince is My Name was a particularly low point.
I like My Name is Prince. I think it hit.
I disagree. I think My Name is Prince is incredible, personally. I thought that self-titled album was brilliant.
It's fantastic. But Parade is getting the nod for me over Purple Rain, simply because it's today. Tomorrow, if we talked to me, I probably would have waxed lyrical about Purple Rain, because, I mean, you can't neglect the influence of tracks like Darling Nikki, and some of the more minor tracks on Purple Rain.
I Would Die For You is fucking incredible.
Yeah, especially the 26-minute extended version. But yeah, Parade, I think it's just so important. Some of the outtakes from that album are very good as well. There's a song he did called Old Friends for Sale, which was one of his most emotive tracks. He later reworked it and it wasn't quite as good. He made some orchestral adjustments with Claire Fisher on that. But I think Parade, where he was at, this kind of sound that he had is just, it's something very different than a lot of mainstream artists have ever been so bold as to do in the past. I think it's massively important for his legacy in terms of becoming transcending beyond just being a funk and pop artist, after he'd done things like 1999 and then Purple Rain, and then he branched out a bit with Around the World in a Day and went a bit psychedelic, and then he kind of came full circle into this weird French jazz album with Parade, which I just think is a masterpiece. And I every time I put it on, I cannot skip a track on it. The film, you can say whatever you like about the film. The film is strange. It's black and white. It's a romantic comedy, neo-noir. It's kind of an ode to Abbott and Costello, and it's quite funny. I like it, but then my sense of humour is similar to Prince's in that way, and it's a bit quirky.
I just think you like Prince so much that even if he was bad, you'd still pretend to enjoy it.
I don't think that's fair.
If he goes make a little joke like, you go, oh man, this guy's a riot. I'd love it.
I think there are some things that I don't like in the Prince back catalogue.
Name 5 things you don't like about Prince.
Name 5 things I don't like about Prince. He didn't have the best ability to pick a single. I think the aforementioned forays into hip-hop were sometimes ill-advised. He was stubborn to the point where a lot of his best stuff got...
He relied upon his staff too much.
Yeah, he then surrounded himself with too many yes men in the later years, so that we didn't get the raw, unfiltered Prince that was always the best Prince. And I think and for a kind of final thing, the album New Power Soul from 1998 is just a heap of garbage.
Well, I'm sorry, Will, because I just know we're gonna have such long of like nut hugging Prince. I just need you to say he's bad a bit to even it out.
I think I've provided some balance there.
I think you have.
I can't reiterate how much of a great album Parade is from a very mediocre and strange film. But the fact that the film is notorious for being one of the worst films, I think it was nominated and won several Razzies that year, and Prince always comes up in the worst music-related movies of all time. But I think the album stands separate from that, and you can take something from the album even if you've got no interest in the film. It's just a miraculously good soundtrack, and I implore everybody to go and listen to it immediately, and then focus on the 12-inch extended version of Mountains, because that is just something else. It's a trip, and it's a trip I want to go on every single day.
I have not heard Parade all the way through, and I am going to listen to it right now when I go out for my walk to go and get some beers. So thank you, Dan. Dan, I thought that was very eloquently put, and I agree with every word you said. I think that I agree with you on Prince as being, one of the greatest musicians I think we've ever been gifted with in music history. But I have not heard Parade all the way through, so I'm going to give it a listen. I'm not going to watch Under a Cherry Moon because I don't have enough time in my life, but I am going to listen to that album. And also, you mentioned Sometimes It Snows in April. That's our song, isn't it, man? It's that song has a particular emotional attachment to me, as you know, for various reasons. Like, it just brings back very good memories. Of me and you downing a bottle of vodka before we went to Voodoo Lounge and do an open mic night.
Well, yeah, that was the night we played You Got the Look 3 times.
Yeah, and I broke strings on Jason Peerless's guitar, both of his guitars. Yeah, no, man, like that was really, really well put. Like, nice one. Really well done, man.
Those are our 5 picks. There's some great honourable mentions that we've all kind of done there. I think we could talk about it until the cows come home. It's one of those subjects where there's so many good soundtracks, so many bad soundtracks as well.
We all agree that musicals suck.
Before we finish off, I think there's one more honourable mention I would like to get in.
Yeah, go for it.
Remember the Matrix soundtrack?
Yeah.
That was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah. I own that. That was brilliant.
I realise I've done the whole episode without mentioning Elliott Smith and the Kevin Smith films. Yeah, how did we not mention that, Martyn? That was core. We managed to not mention Elliott Smith, and that was poor.
You mentioned Prince, and he loves Bat Dance and the Time, so
yeah, it's true.
We'll save Elliott Smith for another day because that's a tragic story. But well, like I said, one of my topics that I would like to choose is tragic deaths of genius musicians, and Elliott Smith falls into that bracket very much so.
I think the plan for the next episode will be something that Alex mentioned, in that I think we should go out of our comfort zone for episode 5. I think we should all listen to the top 10, and you will bear witness to the Cacophony Sessions podcast goes pop.
Oh, we are going to trash it so bad.
Are we doing top 10 albums or top 10 singles?
We are going to listen to the top 10 singles the week we record the next episode, and we are going to get the gloves off.
This is going to hurt. This is going to be painful, man.
This is going to be... I will be swearing more than I did today.
Yeah.
Even if I haven't been drinking.
But yeah, episode 5, Cacophony Sessions podcast goes pop.
You're going to hear some serious fucking rants from these hipsters.
Thanks very much for joining us for tonight's episode of the Cacophony Sessions podcast. That was all about movie soundtracks. We want to know in the comments and on social media, what do you think's the best movie soundtrack? What do you think's the worst movie soundtrack? And which of our opinions are totally wrong? Go away, listen to Parade, listen to all the albums that we've all recommended to you. Listen to some of the singles we chatted shit about for the first sort of 20 minutes of the podcast.
I'll give you some links.
So with that, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. I've been Dan. It's been fun. It's not been a hot one,
Oh man, that's rough. It's not been a hot one like the last one.
It's not quite as hot as the last one. It's a little bit cooler. Temperatures have settled a little bit.
10,000 Scovilles is not the million that we had last week. Habaneros is not Carolina Reapers.
But as always, the conversation itself has been scintillating. With that note, we'll leave you for this week. Make sure you do stay funky, and we'll see you on the flip side. Cheers.
Bye.
See you guys later.
Awesome. I'm keeping that in.